on camera, everybody was getting on me. I said, yeah, you need to step aside.
You took some heat.
You remember, though, that he said, does everybody remember he originally said he was just going to do it for 4 years?
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I brought up.
Right. And did Stephen A., your thoughts on the election as it just went down?
I was surprised at how lopsided it was. I was not surprised by the outcome. Mm-hmm. I saw the outcome coming from a mile away.
It was amazing. I grew up on Richard Pryor. You can't even go back and talk about the book he wrote.
Yeah.
You know, and then what I got to do sometimes is explain, which I hate in big arenas, that this is a thought police thing, and I do not like it. But when I use these words, this is my intent behind those words.
Yeah.
Wow.
So as long as you understand my intent, I still get people, but just don't say it. And I said, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, but they take it out of context and put it on Twitter or put it on Facebook.
I'm surprised they haven't.
Hollywood. Wow, guys. This really kills me. So you got Joy Behar, you got Tim Allen here, and they're talking about woke Hollywood. And what really kills me about what they're talking about, and this is pissing off a lot of people, they're talking about taking things out of context. Where have we seen this before? What political candidate is constantly having their words taken out of context and ultimately used against them? This is a pattern that we continue to see constantly. And it's not just woke Hollywood that we're seeing this with. We're often seeing this with the radical left, the Democrats, and the whole, this massive battle between the left and the right. We're constantly seeing it. So it's not just Tim Allen here, guys. They're using this tactic constantly. And Tim Allen was talking about the thought police with Joy Behar. They're trying to control our thoughts. And we frequently see this with the projecting that they do. We actually saw this very recently with the projection that Attorney General Letitia James in New York did after Donald Trump won the presidential election for 2024. Basically, essentially trying to project fear into the minds of New Yorkers. It was essentially Letitia James and the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, getting up on the podium in front of potentially millions of people and projecting the fear that Donald Trump's campaign would roll back the rights of New Yorkers and remove funding from the city of New York. And it couldn't be farther from the truth.
Because of, saying a word. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's kind of unbelievable. It's
actually disturbing on a fundamental level. It's gotten to the point where literally there's part of me, a deep part of me, that just, F it, bring it on. If you want to cancel me, go ahead.
Wow. And this is the culture that we live in, cancel culture, right? And folks like Tim Allen, they've had enough. They're literally saying, F it, whatever, do whatever you need to do.
Well, you saw it here, folks. Shots fired at the FOMC yesterday, the Q&A session. And I have to say, Powell, when he strutted at the podium, he had that swagger. It was pointed to one person. That person wasn't in the room, but his shadow was. And finally, I was hoping that maybe what turned out to be the most explosive question was the first, but it did come up. Take a listen.
Wow. Shots fired, guys. Jerome Powell is taken aback. He understands that powers are changing. There's a changing of the guard, so to speak. And the rhetoric and the plans that the far left have had that have been essentially over Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve's head for so long are now changing. In fact, Donald Trump wants to make the dollar stronger. And many people believe that the left wanted to destroy the dollar, destroy America, possibly rebuild it, possibly become or build a new world of some sort. There are a lot of different theories that are floating around out there. I'm not really sure which one is probably more accurate than the other, but I think that the most valuable thing that could possibly be done right now, especially when you look at the BRICS nations and what they're concerned, what they're doing, what they're concerned about, with the sanctions that were placed on Russia that really kind of made a lot of other countries dump the dollar and go to gold, buying gold and other types of currencies, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum. But more importantly, I think the thing that we should be doing is going back to what we used to do. And it made no sense that we left it to begin with. The dollar should be tied to gold. The dollar should be backed by gold. Comment down below if you guys agree with that notion.
Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
Look at Jerome Powell's face. Immediately, he answered no. To me, when you have a question like that, when you're presented with a question from a journalist, if you're Jerome Powell and you're standing before the United States government as a Federal Reserve chair and you're asked a very pointed question like, if Donald Trump wanted you to remove yourself from your position, if Donald Trump wanted to fire you from your position, would you go? And Jerome Powell immediately, without any delay, says no. To me, this sounds like he's already thought about this. He wasn't surprised to get this question. So did Donald Trump and Jerome Powell already have a conversation? Did the rumors, did Jerome Powell hear through the grapevine that he is going to be removed as the federal chair? These are the questions that many people are now asking.
No.
Bam! Did I say shots fired? Powell almost daring President-elect Trump to come after him or any of the members of the Federal Reserve. Now, we know recently Trump has already said that he doesn't want to fire Jay Powell, but he does believe the executive branch should have a seat at the table when it comes to monetary policy. Now, of course, the media, still wiping the egg off their face, came in to chime support for Powell. But I think about this all the time, right? An independent Fed, none of that's in the Constitution. Heck, the National Bureau of Economic Research, stamping business cycles, where'd that come from? And now we're talking about Basel III, right? The rest of the world holding American banks hostages. I want to bring you First Trust Advisors Chief Economist Brian Westbury, because he's also an amazing student of history. And I just got to get your thoughts on the Federal Reserve and its potential dust-up between Trump and Powell.
Wow. I mean, for years, the Federal Reserve has essentially been controlling the government. And a lot of people don't even understand or realize that the Federal Reserve is actually not a federal body. The Federal Reserve is not the government. The United States government should be controlling the Federal Reserve. They should be controlling the Fed, but they haven't been. And a lot of economists argue that this is why we have been facing such detriment with our economy, with the US dollar, with the value of the dollar. It's because the Fed has been doing their own thing, and it hasn't necessarily been good for America.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened before, Charles, and but the only way really to get rid of a Fed chair is the way they got rid of Volcker, and that is Reagan slowly put people on the Fed, and they eventually had a mutiny against him. He lost a vote, and then after that happens, you kind of have to quit. You're the captain of the ship, and nobody wants to listen to you, so you quit. You can't force him out.
Right.
Now, you got to question that. That almost gives Jerome Powell too much power, if you ask me. The fact that he is in a position that, this is a very powerful position, arguably a position that could be more powerful than the President of the United States, and Powell cannot be forcibly removed? Seriously?
Do worry that politicians, when you let politicians get control of monetary policy, they're way more likely to keep it too easy.
Right.
Now, and so that's how you get inflation. And today, the embers of inflation, they're not out. And we have to be really careful. If we cut rates too much, if we start printing, doing quantitative easing again, inflation will pop right back up. And that worries me.
And I think to that point, though, Brian, I want to pick up on that, because even without any executive branch pressure, our central bank has had this magical toolbox, and they created all of these different things, right? They created quantitative easing and all of these things. More or less, they put trillions of dollars into an economy, and they've always come to the rescue of it, sometimes when it didn't need it. Where's accountability? How do we find a sweet spot where there's accountability for the public? Not
quantitative easing, aka lowering interest rates, aka PPP loans, EIDL, aka stimulus checks for businesses, families, These are the tools that the Federal Reserve has used over the years, and a lot of people argue, a lot of top economists argue that this is one of the top reasons why we have the level of inflation that we're facing today.
Stephen A., your thoughts on the election as it just went down?
I was surprised at how lopsided it was. I was not surprised by the outcome. I saw the outcome coming from a mile away. You have to take into account, listen, we respect our president, Joe Biden, but here's the reality. He got into office, he promised to be a transitional president, to be a stopgap to pave the way for somebody else to come on board. Into the midterms, it was supposed to be a red wave. It did not happen. The Democrats was flying high. He felt the momentum because he was the incumbent. And instead of leaving, he decided to stay. When he decided to stay, the Democrats were in a quandary because they were expecting him to leave. Now he wants to stay. They're around him. They're seeing the fastball has dissipated to some degree. They're seeing that he's not what he used to be. And what do you do about it? You grease the skids. There's no primary for him to experience. You let him go on stage June 27th, and clearly he was exposed. 3.5 weeks later, he's forced and compelled to step away because donors to the Democratic establishment, they were not going to support that. And then Kamala Harris is inserted. I don't blame her one bit.
Same.
I thought she did a phenomenal job.
Yep.
She went all out.
Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen A. Smith has literally given us the play-by-play leading up to Kamala Harris's run for presidential election, and he doesn't blame Kamala Harris one bit. Comment down below, guys. What do you think about this? Do you think that Kamala Harris is to blame, or do you side with Stephen A. Smith? Do you agree that Kamala Harris basically got the hot potato dropped on her lap, so to speak, at the last minute, and she did the best that she could? Do you think that she would have been a good president, or do you think that America actually got the best thing possible by getting Donald Trump as the winner of 2024's elections? Let me know, guys. Let me know.
She did what she could, but you can't overcome that kind of situation. And remember, there's 2 C words that are incredibly important in America.
Oh, Lord. What C word is he about to say, guys? Keep it PG, sir. Keep it PG, Mr. Stephen A. Smith.
Capitalism is one. Competition is another, because it's a metaphor for capitalism in a lot of people's eyes. Because you were inserted, even though you were the vice president and it was the Biden-Harris administration, you had folks who are independent. I'm not talking about those on the right. I'm not talking about those on the left, just independents, who said, wait a minute. She didn't experience a primary either. And the last time we saw her in a primary was 4 years ago, and she didn't even make it to Iowa.
And this is why people lost it. This is why people literally lost their ever-loving freaking mind. They just inserted her. They inserted Kamala Harris. She didn't earn this thing. They just put her there. And it's like, hold on a second. Let's say you're a Democrat, and you're saying to yourself, yo, I wanted to vote for Biden. I voted for Biden. I didn't ask for this woman to be here. No one freaking voted for her. And the last time that she ran for anything, basically she ended up quitting. She did horribly. So this has left America in shambles. And this is part of why, because, and the Democratic Party did this. They drove people away from the Democratic Party. They drove people over to conservatism. Is that a word? Conservatism? Anyway, they drove them over to the Republican Party. They ended up, there are so many Democrats, and then a lot of people are saying, well, what happened to the 15 million extra votes that Joe Biden got that Kamala Harris didn't get? But the funny thing about this here, guys, is that not only did Kamala Harris not get those extra 15 million votes, Donald Trump didn't get those 15 million votes either. So, well, what happened to those extra 15 million votes? Did 15 million people literally decide, hey, I'm just going to set this one out. I'm not going to vote? Or, excuse me, or did those 15 million people or 15 million votes not even exist to begin with? That's the real question.
Use that as an excuse to point to her level of inexperience. Then you got the war in Russia and Ukraine. You got the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Hamas and Hezbollah and all of that stuff. And you had Trump using codes. Look. Do you want her? Where is she? Where's the interviews? Where's she showing herself? Where's the tough questions? Where's the interrogation?
And you had JD Vance, Donald Trump, they were hitting the nation. They were going to every freaking interview, ABC, CNBC, CNN, freaking Fox News, MSNBC. They were going into the lion's den, regardless of whether the news platform was center, left, or right. They weren't scared. Kamala Harris, she was backing out of interviews left and right. Tim Walz, between his, the tampons in the bathrooms of the boys' bathroom, Tim Walz dancing and skipping across the stage, Tim Walz pulling out the shotgun and not even knowing how to use it, looking like Elmer Fudd. This was a disaster campaign, and it was exposed for what it was.
And he leaned on certain things. And you knew people were going to gravitate to that because right now, as divided as our country is, fear comes associated with that.
That's right.
And because that fear was there, he fed off of it.
Yeah.
And people bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And that's why he's the president.
Well, and it wasn't manufactured fear, though. A lot of times, what I've observed is the left will manufacture fear. Prime example is what we saw just the other day with Letitia James talking about, it was Letitia James and it was the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, and they were projecting this fear that Donald Trump is going to remove funding for New York, just going to drain New York City dry of their federal funding. There's no evidence of that. The projected fear, in addition, was Donald Trump's going to roll back our rights. Roll back what rights? Where are you getting this information from? These are just two examples out of hundreds, if not thousands of examples of manufactured fear being projected onto uninformed folks, people who don't necessarily have time to watch politics 24/7. And when you're saying these things and you're not being officially fact checked, and of course you're not fact checking because they're in on it too, then they get to say pretty much whatever they want to say, and the people just take it for face value, and it's dangerous.
Stephen, let me ask you, because I agree on all counts. There's a lot to unpack of what kind of went wrong for Democrats here. I think a factor is the working class feeling left behind, not reaching out to rural Americans. But what do you identify as what Democrats got wrong? And it seems like you agree Biden maybe should have stepped aside sooner.
He definitely should have stepped aside. I said it a year ago. I was on camera. Everybody was getting on me. I said a year ago, you need to step aside.
You took some heat.
You remember, though, that he said, does everybody remember he originally said he was just going to do it for 4 years?
Yeah.
That's what I brought up.
Right. And
See, that's the funny thing, though. Usually when you're the first to say or do anything, the first thing that happens, what do you guys think is the first thing that happens? The first thing that happens is you get ridiculed. You're the first. What are you talking about? You're crazy. You're bananas. You're on something. What's your agenda? Like, you almost can't be first and not expect to be attacked.
did you think that once you know who stepped in, he said, well, there's nobody, we don't have anybody.
Well, the point is that it's not about who you're going up against when you know you're not what you used to be. And see, this is where covering sports puts me at a distinct advantage. I cover people every day where it's time for you to go, but you're holding on and you don't want to leave.
You want to keep getting that check.
People who cover the world of sports are accustomed to seeing that all the time. And so now here you are, to answer your question directly, you are the left, you leaned, and you were a prisoner to the extreme left in a lot of people's eyes. Well, guess what? Most of America doesn't operate on the fringes. Whether you're left or you're right, you're relatively centrist. You believe in compromise, negotiation, working with one another. Nobody gets to get everything they want.
Right.
The problem is those on the fringes continuously push for you to get everything you want. They're not about getting things done.
That's greed. It's all about control. It's all about manipulation. And this cannot work. Not the way that the government, not the way that our judicial system is set up. It just can't.
They're about getting their way. And if they're not going to get their way, they're about complaining and griping about it because they understand that when you are operating based off of grievance, that's usually what provokes you to get to the polls.
That's right. You want to agitate these folks and you want to piss them off to a point where it's like, you know what? I was going to sit this election out. I wasn't even going to go out there. But you know what? I'm so freaking fed up. I'm so freaking tired. And they just keep pushing people's buttons. I mean, this is how these folks operate. It's a dirty game. It is a dirty freaking game. Yeah. So recently, the winner of Arizona's state Senate was announced. And it's wild because firebrand conservative and MAGA Kari Lake narrowly lost her election to Senator-elect Ruben Gallego in a race that observers believe that had the potential to decide the control of the Senate. So essentially, Republicans clinched a clean sweep, ladies and gentlemen. Republicans took it clean sweep of the White House, the U.S. Senate, and the U.S. House by early Tuesday morning, just this morning, but all did not end well, unfortunately, in Arizona. Essentially, Kari Lake's toss-up campaign came up a little bit short after Gallego edged her out by about 70,000 votes, with more than 95% of the votes already counted. The race was called late last night on Monday by the Associated Press, and ultimately also confirmed further by a previous call that was made by the Decision Desk HQ back on November 9th. They said, quote, "Today we all say Juntos in victory, celebrating the historic nature of electing one of our own veterans to the Senate." Gallego went on to say, "Electing Arizona's first Latino U.S. Senator marks a profound moment for all of us." Gallego went on to say, "It reflects the rich diversity and inclusive spirit of our state." Well, there you have it, folks. There you have it, folks. And let's keep it real, guys. Joe Biden is absolutely pissed off at Kamala Harris. In fact, giving Kamala Harris the cold shoulder during the icy Arlington event. Joe Biden is mad at Kamala. Oh my goodness. So this tension that we've been seeing, we've been feeling, we've been hearing about between Vice President Kamala Harris and the First Lady Joe Biden was so freaking thick on Monday. Unbelievable, guys. I didn't know if one of them was going to put hands on the other. So both of these women, they were sitting next to each other at the Veterans Day commemoration. This took place at the Arlington National Cemetery. Joe Biden was there, and they barely even looked at each other. It was so freaking, it was cold, guys. It was cold. Joe Biden, she didn't even bother to look at Kamala Harris. She just arrived with the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, on the observation balcony and shook hands with all the other attendees. But this really cringy moment just kind of showed how much distance that there is between Kamala Harris and First Lady Joe Biden. But anyway, guys, hey, if you guys appreciate the content, be sure to hit the like button for the video, subscribe to the channel, check out my previous videos, and I'm going to see you guys next time. Be safe. Well, guys, the great wealth transfer is in full effect. And, whether it's Donald Trump that ends up winning the election or if it's Kamala Harris, oh, God, we're in a world of a pickle, as my grandfather would say. Our freedoms are being stolen, guys. Credit card companies are out to get us. And if you don't understand the game, well, you end up getting played by the game. Now, if you're anything like me, guys, you were probably out of shape, maybe in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, and just feeling like the system is just completely taking advantage of you. I remember for a long time, I could rarely ever get any time to spend with my wife. And it's kind of funny because where I used to work with a lot of married men. And a lot of those married men would always complain about their spouses as if they really just didn't even like their spouses, which is sounding like a pretty horrible situation. But that was the case for many of them. They didn't like who they were married to. But I was different. Anyway, through trial and error and through a lot of pain, I figured out how to gain freedom and also lose a lot of weight and actually get in shape. And guys, I'm gonna be honest with you, that was a game changer. To no longer be living paycheck to paycheck, figuring out how to get the credit cards to pay me, the power of a strong credit score. I pay thousands of dollars less per year for the same house as my neighbor just because my credit is better than his is. And this is not to brag. I mean, but this is the truth. The banks are literally taking advantage of the poor. It's like the people who can least afford it, they're charging the poor what is like unofficially called a poor tax or a tax on the poor. I mean, I'm now at a point where, you know, like, number one, I don't pay for credit cards. In fact, credit card companies pay me to use their cards. And I figured out how to build a lifestyle that is just ultimately very, very healthy. I lost a tremendous amount of weight and I put on a lot of muscle. But when I was struggling, I wish I knew people who knew these things. So anyway, I decided to create a community of like-minded people who are also interested, just like me, in living better. So if you guys want to join my community, it's called the Liberty Pursuit Network. It is brand new. Come on over. I'd love to have you guys and join like-minded people. Be positively motivated by others who are also on the same pursuit. So I'm going to leave a link for you guys so you can join me over on the Life Pursuit Network in the description down below this video. So check it out, guys, and let's not be a victim of this great wealth transfer that is taking place right now.